Who are the real enemies of the state? The people they purport to protect us from, or us? You? Are we the enemy of the state? And when we feel enmity from those that govern us, is this the beginning of fascism? I spoke to Sebastian Junger. Those of you that are regular viewers of my content will know that I love his book Tribe, where he talks about how we should organize systems and society in alignment with our evolutionary history, that we get along better in small groups and bands. We talk about his new book in my podcast, Under the Skin, available from Luminary. You can download the app or you can get it off Apple. In this part of the conversation, we talk about localism. We talk about radical politics. We talk about contempt for opposition. We talk about the positive aspects of both left and right-wing politics. It's a fantastic conversation. If you want to see all of it, or listen to all of it, I should say, go over to Luminary and subscribe. I do a different podcast and a different meditation every week. Stay to the end because I need to know what you think of this. Thank you. Now what I want is to advocate for a type of politics that is representative of the needs of what I would categorize or characterize as ordinary people, without any condition placed upon their sort of racial, sexual or religious identity, but a sort of a banding together in much in the spirit as you that you described there, without that blitz. I mean, of course I'm like not old enough to remember, but like I sort of in living memory I had sort of grandparents and stuff that spoke about that time, and it seemed that there was a sense of a common enemy and something to stand up for. And I'm sure you could like tell that story very differently and point out sort of economic imperatives that were being pursued and colonial ideals and hypocrisies. But it seemed, that on some level the ordinary folk were pursuing something meaningful there, and a return to this is something that obviously without a bloody war and a Holocaust and the concomitant nightmares that accompanied it, is something that that for me seems important.
So this is a big request, it's a big ask, it's a big project. But if you just theoretically, if you wanted to sort of reform society, and I think it desperately needs reform, right? I mean, I think we're headed towards some very tough times if we don't start to live differently, at every level. So there's a website that I found called Front Porch Nation, right? And basically they're slightly conservative in a way that I sort of like, even though I'm a liberal, that I kind of like it's very smart, compassionate conservatism, but they're advocating for localism, communitarianism, from a slightly conservative viewpoint. And it's so refreshing, right? It's fantastic. So if you could implement a kind of localism and communitarianism and an anarchism at the local level, right? And then if you could couple that with purging money and corruption from politics. How? I don't know, because politicians are not going to want to do that because they depend on that money. So how do you get them to do it? I don't know. But just theoretically, if you could do that, if you have localism coupled with cleaning money out of politics, and then finally making it a political sin to cast the political opposition as an enemy of the state. I mean, that's where you start to get fascism, right? My father grew up in Spain, and he fled when Franco came in. And what Franco did that Trump failed to do, Trump failed because he didn't have the military behind him. Franco did. And what he did was basically say the progressive coalition that won an election were enemies of the nation. Right? They just weren't, they weren't politically on the other side of the fence of Franco. They were actually enemies of the nation of Spain. And therefore, they could be gotten rid of by any means necessary, including killing them. Right? So that kind of rhetoric where you cast your political opponent as an enemy of the state opens up a can of worms that really leads towards fascism. And so if you did those three things, localism, and you got money out of politics, and you so heavily sanctioned that kind of contemptuous, aggressive speech from politics that it paid negative dividends politically, I think you could save our modern democracies, right? So just to move on from what you said, that to me, in short version, is what we would need to do.
I've written them down. I've written down those ideas,
awesome.
Because I've got big plans, Sebastian. But I love what you said about the removal of contempt. That should not be part of the discourse. Once you have contempt for another person, it's the beginning of legitimization of persecution and even execution. I think what you're saying about localism is vital, that most people, as you know, we've discussed, live lives where they feel alienated and purposeless. And I feel that engagement with your community is absolutely vital. And I would add once more that the sort of centre-left media machine did a lot of, what do I want to say, vilification of like what you might call ordinary Trump voting folk as well. Like it was just a machine, like, you know, and like one of the things that I was uneasy about is like, this is nearly half the population, what's going on? You know, even Jon Stewart was saying there's an infatuation with Trump and Trumpism, and it's sort of being like, you know, because of for all sorts of crossing vectors, like the stuff on the CNN's a media entertainment company. Their media does well when they talk about Trump. You can see them sort of needing to talk about Trump because, oh shit, otherwise it's banal. Our content is banal without this sort of evocative figure that they sort of hanker after and loathe and are sort of conflicted about. But yeah, I feel you. Those are some great principles. Localism, money out, the end of lobbying, and sort of a kind of a commitment to end contempt. One of the things that I got from like a man called Luke Kemp, who's a sort of a doctor and an academic around existential crises of all things. He talked about how like the globally emergency measures have been introduced around the pandemic that haven't been repealed yet, and it's possible we won't ever see repealed, and that these emergency measures are frequently harbingers of tyranny. And he even cited that the Weimar Republic, prior to the rise of National Socialism, was introducing a lot of these emergency measures, and sort of even Napoleonic or immediately pre-Napoleonic France. And you know, I think that this problem is bigger than any individual, bigger than both parties, and requires a kind of a fundamental, almost universal address of what our values are really, because I think that we actually live within an ideology that's much more expansive than what we're being offered. That is a sort of a fundamentalist consumer capitalism that does not abate regardless of which one of those parties flips in. Like obviously that system could withstand Trump. It withstood Trump. It can withstand Biden. It withstood him. It can withstand like what it clearly didn't like the look of was Sanders. And I had like Marianne on here, Marianne Williamson, and I go, do you think that the Democrat Party would have rather lost with Clinton and had Trump than won with Bernie Sanders? And she said that that is what she felt happened.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the easy question. Yeah. I mean, my friend Sarah Shays, who I mentioned on Corruption in America, she would absolutely say that the left is so in bed with corporations that they would actually rather enjoy Trump for 4 years than have the fig leaf stripped away. I mean, the left is horribly elitist. They're enormously wealthy. They are not for the common man, the common person. I mean, they used to be, right? I mean, there was, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, the left wing was very, very solidly pro-labor, right? And it was a working class party, and they were for the common man, and they ceded that territory to the Republicans that then horribly misused their responsibility to the common man, right? So now nobody is standing up for that person. And so, I would say that someone like Bernie Sanders is enormously threatening to the establishment of both parties. I also found that some of his policies, although enormously admirable, to the extent that I looked into them, I wasn't sure he had quite done the numbers and figured the numbers out sufficiently to implement these wonderful policies, without raising taxes, which is sort of politically a death sentence. So I'm not quite sure he actually had the answers, but he certainly had the ideas. He certainly had the ideals. And I think they were, Sarah for sure would say, totally threatening to the left wing, and they would never back someone like Bernie Sanders. He's going to take their money, and they don't want that. Yeah,
because when looking at where their sort of economic resources are for meaningful social change, you don't even have to impede the middle class anymore. Now you're talking about a sort of a tiny percentage of the population being meaningfully taxed, even if you want to operate within a sort of a centralized statist model. So
Hey, do you want your All About Freedom, your new book? What's it about?
Did you enjoy that video? Do you agree with Sebastian Junger? Do you agree with me? Do you feel optimistic about the future? Where do you think we need to change? How can we improve our current conditions? Please let me know in the comments below. Give me a like, subscribe to this. Let me know what you think. Give us a like, give us a subscribe if you want to. If you want to learn a little bit more about meditation, please watch this side channel, my Awakening channel. Subscribe to that as well. And also, please watch this video if you enjoyed this one. Thanks very much. If you enjoyed that, perhaps you'll consider subscribing to Luminary. It's up to you. Most importantly of all, stay free. Thank you.